Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the new album from Broken Bells, titled After the Disco. You know, it's hard to know what you're going to get when you have two acts who choose to collaborate, because believe it or not, you don't always get success. Yeah, I've covered a number of great collaborations on the show. Run the Jewels, Step Brothers, half Within Temptation's last album, but you don't always get success when you put together artists that have differing musical style. You don't always get disasters either. The odds of getting a Lulu aren't usually likely when it comes to these albums because truly catastrophic records are pretty rare. More often than not, you just get wildly incompatible styles and a lack of cohesion that doesn't quite damn the album but doesn't quite save it either. Or you get a fusion in between that's somewhat agreeable, but doesn't really fully embrace either act's true strengths and make the best of it. And it's in the latter category where I originally placed Broken Bells' self-titled debut album. James Mercer of critically acclaimed indie rock group The Shins and acclaimed producer Danger Mouse, who's worked with Jay-Z, The Black Keys, and Beck, came together to form the Broken Bells project. And at the time, I mostly liked the results. The Shins have always had a taste for blissed out, psychedelia, and old-fashioned pop that made their first three albums infinitely listenable, and combined with Danger Mouse's eclectic brand of production and Mercer's painfully honest and emotionally effective lyrics, Broken Bells had a lot of catchy, effective charm, even if it was a little bit lightweight in terms of real lyrical subject matter and never really came together as a cohesive work into something that was all that special. In other words, it wasn't indicative of both men's best work, and when James Mercer went back and made a new Shins album in 2012, I didn't expect to see much from this project ever again. Well, it turns out I was wrong, and James Mercer and Danger Mouse have gotten back together to release a new album titled After the Disco under the Broken Bells name this year. How'd it go? Well, it's an interesting case, I should say that, because for all intents and purposes, I should really love After the Disco by Broken Bells. I like both artists. The album is more cohesive than their debut, and musically they're calling back to one of my favorite decades for music ever. But you know what? I'm sorry, folks. I just don't think it works as much as a whole, and as much as I tried to really try to like it, it just falls really flat for me. And it's not just one big problem either, but a bunch of little issues scattered across the record that end up making it a fair bit less than the sum of its parts. It's definitely not bad, let me stress that, but you know what? It's not nearly as good as it should be, so that's always a little depressing. So, okay, let's start with the overarching album concept, which is a fair bit darker than most people were probably expecting off of the self-titled debut. An exploration of what would happen after a long night at the disco. This is a time when people are drunk, horny, depressed, tired, and searching for whatever meaning they can find as they step out into the cold night. And on a technical level, James Mercer's songwriting captures this very well. I'm not going to deny that he captures a pretty wide range of potential hookups, breakups, and situations where everything goes awry and people ponder their place in the universe, and often under serious brands of intoxication. But here's where we run into the first problem. There's a lot of good text here. There's a lot of good description. There's a lot of good situations that are articulated. But there's very little subtext. There isn't a lot of meaning discussed behind this. A lot of fleeting, ephemeral situations, but nothing all that tangible underneath it, which means a lot of the songs don't have a lot of dramatic weight for me. And honestly, I don't get the feeling that that particular ephemeralness was the point, because this album is taking itself way too seriously, and that takes us to the instrumentation and vocals, which are attempting to evoke a disco slash funk slash post-punk slash new wave inspired music of the late 70s, much in the same way that Daft Punk and Franz Ferdinand did last year on their albums. Both albums that I absolutely loved, by the way, and they made my year-end list. And I have to be honest, I love this era of rock. It's theatrical and cheesy and hyperbolic to be sure, but it's a ton of fun, and the tight bass lines combined with the eerie synths and sizzling guitars adds a lot of chintzy character to the music, for which I've always had real fun. Yes, it's ridiculous and occasionally pretty campy, and yeah, it's kind of silly, but I like it. And thus, it's really painful to watch how much Broken Bells just consistently misses the mark here. And you know what? It's not because Danger Mouse doesn't get this time period, because he does. In fact, I think he understands the overall concept behind how to make this style of rock. He knows how to make it work because he's got all the essential ingredients here with the kitschy multi-tracking and the string segments and the slight unearthliness to the production. And yeah, the bass lines are solid, and so there's some fun guitar work with some good tonal choices. Honestly, the guitars and the bass line is the best stuff on the album, but the synths rarely work, often coming across as watery and wheedling without the tightness that gave early synthesizers their unique presence in late 70s music. Honestly, it's the synth parts that are the weakest point of this album instrumentally. And maybe it comes from the self-awareness from the artist, or the subject matter of the lyrics, or the minor chord choices made in the melody lines, but the production isn't nearly as charming or as fun as it should be, with the string segments and horn sections coming across as too blaring or too in on the joke, semi-ironic to really win any points with me. And that's saying nothing about the inconsistent tone on this record, which on songs like Perfect World and Lazy Wonderland, lyrically they try to have that carefree sense of earnest optimism, but musically they never go far enough to back up that tone, or they go too far and miss the point entirely. Take Control, one of the better songs on the album that I actually kind of like, that begins with a pretty solid post-punk vibe, talking about a breakdown in a BDSM-inspired relationship. And then it brings in these string sections and the organ and the big brass band, and it just becomes way too silly and overwrought for me to take seriously. And look, some of this comes back to James Mercer, and I really do like his voice a lot. He's got a great sense of melody and solid hooks. He's a very good technical songwriter, but I'm not sure he's a good fit for this sort of material. Oh, he tries, and when he dips into his falsetto, you can tell he's trying his best to recreate that Bee Gees classic iconic disco sound. But you know what? Maybe he doesn't have the overblown pomp or larger-than-life bombast or the ability to take himself completely not seriously in order to sell these songs effectively. A song like the Bowie-esque Lazy Wonderland, it calls out for an Alex Kapranos to take the song in an over-the-top direction into something really special. And I gotta be honest, James Mercer isn't the singer to really do that, at least not on this album, even with the support of child choirs and multi-tracking that falls very quickly into campy territory and not in a good way. He's better with hazy psychedelia or moments of hyper-earnest melancholy like Angel and the Fool, a song that I should note shares distressingly similar chords to the Across the Universe arrangement of While My Guitar Gently Weeps, by the way. I will say that he's not bad in the slinky, disco, nightclub pickup vibe, but you know what? The watery synths and the muted melodies and the tonal mishmash where everything is just too sour and bitter and cynical. These songs are not the closest things to sexy, and they're not particularly fun either. And sure, that might have been the point as part of the lyrics. They might have been trying to emphasize that those nighttime hookups after the disco, they might not be all that enjoyable. They might not be all that fun. They might be a bad thing for the artist in the morning. They might reflect internal insecurities that might be detrimental to pursue. But you know what? The way it's framed here, the way it's discussed, and without the deeper lack of subtext, it doesn't exactly make for an enjoyable listening experience, at least for me. Look guys, I really want to like this album. Hell, there's a few songs here that have some solid grooves, and they're a fair bit of fun, but not enough of them, and Broken Bells don't seem to want to emphasize that fun or kitsch on this record. They want to focus on the dark depression and loneliness, underscoring even the brighter moments, even the moments where the guys are looking to have sex and have that hookup moment. It's all underscored with this caustic bitterness and sourness that really upset me. Well, and look, that might be a fine choice, but the album doesn't really say or do much with it. Once again, it's text, not subtext, coupled with instrumentation and production that has only some of the cheesiness but only half-heartedly embraces it, and some really poor synth and production choices. This album just does not work nearly as well as it should, and worst of all, unfortunately, doesn't end up being all that memorable. And I gotta say, I'm a huge sucker for 70s inspired instrumentation, especially late 70s inspired instrumentation, but I also know when it really doesn't work for me. I'm sorry guys, 5 out of 10, and only a recommendation if you're a really big Broken Bells fan, and you've already listened to Random Access Memories by Daft Punk and Right Thoughts, Right Words, Right Action by Franz Ferdinand. Both of them are better 70s inspired albums, and both of them actually remember to have some fun with the material, which Broken Bells, they don't quite do. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Before you guys inject a lot of hatred into the comments, I really want to like this album, guys. This stuff is right up my speed. This is the sort of stuff that I'm a huge mark for, and unfortunately it didn't work out the way I was hoping. And that does suck. If you have any other albums you'd like me to cover throughout the course of this year, or if there's anything I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'd be more than happy to hear about it. But until then, see you next time.